One. Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. I am joined today by Bill and Randall in a few minutes. And we're going to be covering some wide receivers and some corners in the 2025 NFL Draft. Bill, what's going on today?
So we're going to talk wide receivers and cornerbacks. Me and Randall are. We're going to talk some prospects that are probably higher on a few people's boards and probably a little bit lower on a few people's boards. We've also got, me and Randall have kind of been going back and forth on X. And by the way, if you're looking, I am at Spark Scouting on X. You can find me there. You can find Randall at Randall Slifer. He'll be here shortly. We went back and forth a little bit on some prospects we're going to talk about, kind of give you the ins, the outs, the ups, the downs to kind of help you build your draft boards out. That's what we've got going on today. And while we wait for Randall, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get started. And Randall can hop in right behind me because I'm sure he's going to have a lot to say about our first wide receiver. So our first wide receiver, small school guy. There he is.
My apologies.
You're fine. Traffic was murder coming in, wasn't it? Coming down to 405. Absolutely. So, Randall, I was just telling him we're going to dive on into our first wide receiver of the night. It's small school special. Tory Horton, the wide receiver from Colorado State. 6'3", 185. Big things about Tory Horton. I love. He's a very versatile guy. He can play the slot. He can play outside wide. He contributes as a punt returner. He's got very strong ball tracking skills, hand-eye coordination to adjust to underthrown balls, back shoulder throws. He's got what I call the zip code ability. If a quarterback can get it in the zip code he's in, he's going to make the catch.
Yep, I love that analogy.
He's really got really good double moves and stutter steps to freeze defenders. There's some times where he makes defenders just look silly, especially on the outside with his burst and his acceleration. The biggest knock for me on Tory Horton is he is lean. We're talking 185 pounds soaking wet out of the pool.
And 6'3".
And 6'3". So it shows. And the other thing that I have to knock him for, I've seen it happen, he tends to make too many body catches, which leads to drops. And it's something that it's got to be corrected at the next level or it's going to be a problem. I have a mid-second round grade on Tory Horton right now because I think he's got physical tools and on-field production to make that impact. And he reminds me a lot of Darius Slayton from the New York Giants in that same concept. He's a great ball tracker. He's got good vision. He's creative in the open field, but there are some catching concerns, and that frames a little bit of concern. But Randall, how do you feel about Mr. Tory Horton?
Yeah, I mean, that was very well done, to be honest with you. His versatility is the number one thing that pops out at me. I mean, he was a 3-star recruit, but he was also a 3-sport athlete in high school. He did baseball, basketball, and football. So that talent is always there when you see those 3 sports in my head, to be honest. Baseball, hand-eye, basketball, accuracy, and football, obviously, playing football. His route running is what I really love about it, and his versatility, because, I mean, he's running 3.45 yards per route run, which is crazy. And as you mentioned, the missed tackles, he's already got 7. And I bet 6 out of those 7 were those that you talked about making him silly. But his route running on his double moves, I think, is super fun to watch because he does those. When he burns a cornerback, that double move, either dropping the hips or doing a hitch, really works well with him. So the versatility in slot yards and deep yards is year over year. And the premium stats are great. I mean, Oregon State, he pulled 158 and a touchdown, which is impressive against Oregon State. So I'll take that. And then when you look at that game in Oregon State, which was robust in versatility, if you go back last year against Colorado, when they played Colorado, basically all Colorado played was too deep. They played too high safety, and they were like, we won't give you the long shot, take the underneath. And he went 16 for, I believe it was 16 for like 155 because basically the coach saw Tory Horton doing crossers and they wouldn't defend it. And he caught 14 balls straight on crossers and basically just gave them 140 yards to beat Colorado. And then on his TD catch in there was one intermediate touch catch that he caught at like 15 yards and burned him on that double move, caused for a touchdown. So that versatility and willing to do basically everything on that offense was really fun to see.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. I agree.
Couple questions. So last year, if Horton came out, I had him in the top 100. And obviously this year, it looks like it's a good move, going back to school, because now we're talking about him in the top 50. How much do you think he improved from last year to this year?
I believe that.
You feel that one?
Yeah, I think he played. I think 2023 was kind of a building block into what he became in 2024. His depth in 2023 was a little skewed, and he brought more intermediate into 2024, and I think that's what makes him more at the NFL level. There was a lot of short and some deeps in 2023. He went 5 for 27 in deeps, but his average target of depth on those 20+ yards was 53.4 yards. So they were hot. They were throwing those like crazy, like as deep as you can. And then it got down to about 36.7 on those 20+. So those intermediate and deep passes for Tory Horton in 2024 is what kind of builds him into that top 50 versus top 100.
Awesome.
Yep.
My comp was Calvin Ridley.
Ooh.
Ooh.
I love that. I love that.
You're like going. Some of your comps are going to like the top of the list. You're like picking. That's all right.
Okay, so I don't in this one, but I do believe that I want to give every kid the benefit of the doubt halfway through the 2024 season and just wish for the best. That's how I operate. I don't think I could change actually. So you're stuck with me.
Well, but I think that's why the draft is exciting, because we hope for the best for all of these guys.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So,
and if you think that comp's at the top of the list, we Randall and I, we've got some comps coming that are probably going to make that one look a little crazy, but bear with us. All right. So next one on the board is Tez Johnson, the slot receiver, wide receiver from Oregon, 5'10", 160 pounds. He's got speed and acceleration. He can get up quickly. He is a catch and run threat with the ball. You could use him on returns as well with that speed. The big thing is he's so dynamic with the ball in his hands, but also he's very precise as a route runner with the ability to create separation from defensive backs. So not only can he get up to speed quickly, but if you have him run routes over the middle, those crossers, those in-breaking routes, out-breaking routes, he can get to those quickly and get very crisp on those routes. The biggest knock for him is 160 pounds is going to be a huge knock. Some teams are going to look at that and take him completely off the board. It's the old Percy Harvin small wide receiver adage that, 160 pounds, can he stay healthy at the next level?
Right.
He does have some issues against press coverage, spending too much time hand fighting with defenders. I am intrigued to see the matchup coming tomorrow, Oregon versus Michigan, and how he deals with those Michigan corners and that Michigan defensive backfield who are very good at press coverage, and how he plans to handle that. But I think with that speed, he's going to be one of those guys that when we get to combine season, the biggest question is going to be his weight, but also a lot of teams are going to see him run, sub 4.3 potentially, sub 4.4 potentially. Some, in some cases, I see him doing like a 4.32, 4.33, and somebody's going to say, I don't care if he's 160 pounds. He doesn't have to be durable because they can't catch up to him. But Randall, how do you feel about Tez Johnson?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to run like a 4.32. I think you're pretty much spot on there. I think he gets that 4.32. I mean, that is his biggest flaw. And then, the NFL is adapting in those small frame guys. I do know, my comp is Tank Dell. And in that fact, he unfortunately did get an injury on his rookie year and things along those lines. But I do believe that Tez Johnson, with 2 good years of production, will overshadow that. I think he amassed 1,200 yards with Troy Franklin on the other side of him, which is great. And him being a 6'3" fast guy too, kind of stunted a little of his versatility in 2023. In 2024, once Troy left, he got put outside a lot more, which I loved. It was, I believe, 16% of his snaps in 2024 are on the outside, opposed to basically 5 in 2023. So that kind of made him a little bit more versatile. And in the slot, it helped him on a couple of those routes, on crossers and things along those lines, because instead of going out on a hitch on a flat, coming inside with those intermediate, I really like to see him do, especially like in that Illinois game when Oregon played Illinois and they crushed them last week. That crosser route, and the one you talked about gaining separation off that receiver, coming around on that crosser route, he gained that separation, but then that small 160-pound frame was able to slide his way down the sideline because he's kind of so small and quick that gave him that extra 10 yards after the catch for that touchdown. So I'm definitely a big fan of him. I'm also wishing him the best on that. My comp was Tank Dell, in the matter of fact of, I'm not sure how many people know or if it's wide known, but Bo Nix's family took him in 2018 when in Auburn. So then, in high school and stuff like that, and played with Bo Nix in high school. And then eventually when they went their separate ways, because he went to Auburn, and then they ended up transferring together into Oregon, and they got to play together. So Tank Dell is a double comp for me, because when Tank Dell came out of the draft, when CJ Stroud got drafted, he told the front office to get Tank Dell, and they did. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that Bo Nix tells the Broncos front office to get Tez Johnson, because somebody that's 165 pounds best stays healthy with a quarterback that knows what he's doing at all times to stay away from those hospital balls.
Yeah.
So absolutely. This is probably the wrong episode, but do we have a Sean Payton wide receiver type? Like, has Sean Payton as an offensive coordinator had a player like Tez Johnson before?
That's a great question.
We don't have to answer that now. We can save that one. We'll talk about Tez Johnson in another episode. But
we'll put a pin in that. I love
that Bo Nix analogy. That was really good. We need to do some research on Sean Payton wide receivers.
For sure. So, I think the short and intermediate and behind the line of scrimmage can be Michael Thomas-esque, but obviously he's not the size nor the build in that. But short and short and behind line of scrimmage, Tez can do well.
Yep, absolutely. So next wide receiver, this is one of my guys that I'm going to bang the table for. It's Theo Wease Jr. from Missouri, 6'2", 192. And let me tell you, he has got hands, and they are reliable, whether he's on the outside, whether he's over the middle. He also has a proficiency to stretch defenses, creating big play potential. And he's got a very good straight line speed. He probably will run a 4.42, 4.43 when we talk in the 40-yard dash, so he can get separation from defenders. My favorite part, he's very versatile in his route tree. He can run out routes. He can run slants. He can run corner routes. He can run flag routes. He can run the go routes. He can run them all. He also has a winning mentality, a high football IQ. So you see it in zone coverage, especially, where he immediately finds that hole in that zone coverage, just sits down and waits for that ball. So it's time for my first hot take of the evening. And this one's going to be probably a little crazy. We talk a lot about wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2s, Batmans and Robins, the Jamar Chase, T. Higgins combos of the world. I think right now in college football at the University of Missouri, they have the best 1-2 combination of wide receivers in Luther Burden and Theo Wease in the entire country. I think these two guys are probably some of the most talented folks across the entire country. My biggest knock on Theo Wease is I'd love to see him be more consistent in his production. You'll see games where he just blows up the entire thing, multiple catches, many yards, and then you'll see him disappear with 1 or 2 catches. I would also like to see him be able to release a little bit better against press coverage on the line of scrimmage, just like Tez Johnson. Sometimes he has a little bit of hand fighting issues. I've got a late third, early fourth round grade on Theo, and he reminds me a lot of DJ Chark from the Chargers, Jaguars, and that same type of player, that same big body guy who's got reliable hands, not so great against press coverage. But he's one of the guys, if I'm in a draft room, if I'm in the Browns draft room or I'm in a team's draft room, I'm not only banging the table, I'm flipping the table over and I'm throwing it out the nearest window to turn in the card for Theo Wease. But Randall, how do you feel about Theo?
Yeah, honestly, I agree. I love Theo Wease in the fact of his zone. The first thing that I had on my scouting report in big letters was how he plays against zone and his feel for that, which is always one of my favorite things coming out of college, because then you're watching tape, you're understanding coverages and packages and things along those lines. And he excels at that. Like, might be best right now when it comes out of that. I do think he needs to work if he is going to have the 20 plus throws. 2023 was impressive. Do you know, question for you, Bill, do you know in 2024, I've seen a little bit of a dip. I've seen a couple of those reps on it, but 2023, he went 7 on 17 targets for 3 touchdowns, and now we're sitting at 3 on 12 targets for 1 touchdown. Do you think that's scheme in 2024, or do you think that, because obviously Luther Burden was still with them last year, but do you see anything in that dip and deep shots?
I haven't seen much in the dip and deep shots. I think they're utilizing the speed more on the screen game, on the short game, rather than they are taking those deep shots. Also, you look at the quarterback in Brady Cook, he doesn't have the strongest arm in the world. He doesn't have the arm to make all of those deep throws. That's why it was a little bit inaccurate last year. But I think the offensive coordinator wised up and said, hey, I have a guy in Luther Burden who's really electric, and I have a guy over here in Theo Wease who's also very reliable with some straight line speed. And instead of sending them on vertical routes on every single play, let me run some bubble screens, let me run some short 3-yard passes, get the balls in their hand in space, and let them make the plays. So I haven't seen it so much there, but yeah, I agree. It is a stark contrast.
For sure. And then, my other thing that I had on him, which I love, is his interviews are his interviews are great. I've listened to 2 or 3 interviews. He talks efficiently, and it's very weird because we all watch football 24/7, and we know when somebody's sitting on the podium and just saying cliches. He does say some cliches, but he actually means them. Like, he actually he knows what he's saying, and he actually means them, sort of thing. Like, I was watching it, you always hear those random cliches, but then when he's talking about it, he'll explain the cliche, like he'll go deeper into it, and he'll talk about it and what he's going to do. So his leadership mentality and his intelligence was crazy for me. I love that. And I do think that after the season's over, Senior Bowl or whenever he gets to take reps against cornerbacks is going to be his shining moment, because I do believe that I don't have any doubt that he's going to excel at that. And then those clips are going to go viral, and then that's when mainstream media is going to start talking about Theo Wease.
Well, and there's always a challenge, right? So during the draft, you're going to hear me say this on a lot of podcasts. This is the other guy, right? Burden is going to get all of the PR, all of the press. That's what you're going to see on social media. Yes. Wease is the other guy. And I think when I heard Bill, you said late 3 or round 4 is kind of where you see him, somewhere right around the top 100, right, Bill?
Yep, that is correct. Right around that top 100.
This is if you're in the top 125, you're playing football on Sundays. Whether you're a starter or a key guy off the bench, Theo Wease can be your wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, coming right in as a rookie. So he can be part of a wide receiver room. He may not be the guy, but he can be a guy who's going to help your team. So
absolutely,
always pay attention to the other guy.
Yep, absolutely.
Right, we'll be doing that with offensive tackles and edges and plenty of other positions as the draft season rolls around.
Right, absolutely.
And then if you have any hip hop fans that are watching, he sounds exactly like Boldy James, and it's like one of my favorite voices ever. Anyway, I couldn't help it. It was amazing.
Yep. So Randall, do you want to introduce Andrew?
All right, yes. So I'll put a disclaimer out here as a bias for everybody watching. I live about 5 miles from the Razorback Stadium, so I get to see him live, whole 9 yards. So this bias scouting report that I'm about to talk about is I'm not banging the table to put him in the top 100. I'm just saying let's get him out of UDFA and into early day 3 is at where I believe he should be. But Andrew Armstrong, he has 2 successful years so far with Arkansas after transfer, 6'4", 202. I believe his combine is going to be quicker. He plays fast, but he is a little bit slow. I would like to see him run a 4.45. He's got super long arms, and his catch radius is pretty insane. Curl routes can basically, even if he gets sticky and it's an off throw, he can catch those. In 2023, he had 764 yards and 5 touchdowns, while as an IRK, Sam Pittman was the offensive line coach for Georgia. 2023 offensive line was 109th in yards per carry and 129th in allowing sacks at 4 per game. So still putting up 750 yards and 5 touchdowns with basically number 2 offensive line, while Division II offensive line was still impressive. And now he's putting up 722 yards as of now and not shying away from big competition. LSU, 9 catches, 132 yards. Tennessee, 6 catches for 72 yards, and he took that game over. Or 9 and 132 for Tennessee, 7 catches, 94 yards for LSU, and then 6 catches and 72 yards for Texas A&M, 10 catches for 164 for Oregon State. So that was great. And then you're even taking into account Taylen Green. I love Taylen Green, but he needs reps to get better. So I do believe that even him playing with a newer quarterback and doing what he's doing is impressive. My number one thing that I do love about him is his releases and then his catch radius. He does run 90% of his routes are curls, crossers, and go routes. That's basically what he's got in the bag right now, but I do think he's smart enough to expand that route tree. That's probably his biggest flaw. And weirdly enough, he's not as physical at the line of scrimmage that I'd like to see him as, a 6'4", 202 guy. I'd like to see him kind of bully once in a while and become a better run blocker. My favorite thing about his route running, though, is his big man curl. I think my favorite curl is what Mike Evans does, is he pulls the curl and then uses his body as leverage. So then basically what you have is either your cornerback's going to hit you in the back for a PI, or it's going to go right to your numbers, and then you're going to catch it sort of thing. So he's very good at that, and that's one of my favorite things. My comp for him is George Pickens, because I love Andrew Armstrong. and then I will let Bill put me back to earth.
Yeah. So I like Andrew Armstrong. I'm not in love with him as you are, but I do like Andrew Armstrong. He's a big body guy, 6'4", 200 pounds. We talked about it. He has really good play recognition, and one of the things that I love that he does very well is he does run those curl routes, but he's great in the scramble drill. When things break down, he's got the ability to see with his football IQ, okay, I've got an open hole in a zone here. Let me run 2 or 3 yards this way, get open for my quarterback. He's great about coming back for those. He also, once he runs those curls and makes that catch, he doesn't sink his hips and gets upfield in a hurry. So I see him probably running a 4.5, right around that range. I have a day 3 grade on him, but I'm probably a little bit higher on him. My comp for him is a little bit weird, so people are going to think I'm crazy, but it's Matt Jones, the former Arkansas Razorback quarterback turned wide receiver. Even though Matt was a little bit on the smaller side, 6'2" range, I think it's a lot of the same things. You have a guy who is very athletic, who can get upfield in a hurry. The big thing, I would love to see his play strength improve. I would love to see, obviously, him run a little bit faster in the 40. I think if he runs a 4.55, 4.5, probably a 4.6, I'm going to start to flag it because it's going to be a little bit too slow for my likes. But he's got very long arms, and he can go up and get the ball in a hurry. I think he's going to be one of those day 3 guys that probably sits on a practice squad for a year or two, gets his feet underneath him, and then he'll be starting to make some plays on game days.
And that's all I'm asking.
Yeah. So I have a question, because when he got added to the list, I think he was the 8th guy that was added to the list for today. when I added it, it looked like he has college eligibility left. Is he definitely in this draft, or is there debate as to whether or not he would go back to school?
It is debatable, but the talkings of Fayetteville said that it'll be his last year. It's not, to me, I'd give it 75% on declaring. And I don't think he really has much less to accomplish unless he's looking for college success. But, I mean, Taylor Green's going to be great next year, but I don't see, Patino might be the head coach next year and Pittman might be gone. Too much uncertainty in the college level unless you transfer. Might as well just go to the draft and give it a shot.
Yep, absolutely. That's what I think. I think he's one of those guys that when we get him out in the Shrine Bowls and the East-West games and the Senior Bowl especially, teams are going to see that size and they're going to fall in love with that size and they're going to refer back to the tape and see a lot of those things that he does well. And I think he'll probably work his way into day 3 at some point.
Yes. All right, Jack Bech, if you don't mind, I'll start off, Bill.
Absolutely, have at
This
it.
is Randall's guy. He wants to start
This
off.
is his guy.
I enjoy Jack Bech. Yeah, my comp's going to be funny for you. All right, Jack Bech, 6'2", 215. I think he's going to run a good 40, to be honest. 3-star recruit, and then that beautiful trend of wide receivers that I think everybody loves is he was very good at basketball. Good dual athlete out of high school, played great basketball. Started at LSU, so got recruited by LSU, transferred to TCU. He's a great route runner. He has great spatial awareness, and his big frame I love. He had 125.5 QB rating when targeted, so he's QB friendly. This year, if you look at the stats, it was Stanford. He went 6 for 139. He took a game break, I guess, and then went back to back to back. And UCF 9 for 200, SMU 8 for 166, and then Kansas 10 for 131. I mean, just insanity. Kansas must have been scared S-less when they saw the UCF and SMU game before. He has a crazy production. I know it's only kind of 1 year sort of thing, but I'm willing to forego that the way he plays. His lower half contact balance is really, really good for his size. When he takes a hit, he knows how to stay up, and then his short speed takes off quickly, and he can kind of separate from himself with the ball in hand for that run after the catch. His UCF touchdown is kind of where, when I was watching tape, it stuck out for me, is his pivoting and putting his foot in the ground. When he pivots on that touchdown, he ran an inside post. He made a twitch to make the safety turn his back, just a small twitch. Safety turned his back. Once he saw that safety's back, he moved. So then he was doing a 540. The safety was doing a 540 and couldn't find him, sort of thing. So that recognition of when to turn, I loved about it. And my comp for him is actually tempered in Michael Wilson from Arizona, because I kind of love what Michael Wilson's doing in 2024. He is one of those wide receivers where, especially with Kyler Murray, he scrambles, and then you're looking there and you're like, oh no, Kyler Murray's going to take a sack, and then Michael Wilson's open. He can separate from the receiver. He's open. He's smart. So I like what Michael Wilson's doing, and then I guess he kind of has a little bit of Cooper Kupp-esque. I'll never compare anybody to Cooper Kupp, because Cooper Kupp is one of one, but I see Jack Bech as somebody to where you see his routes ran, and you're like, that looked good, but it was so efficient that he's always separated. And that's what Cooper Kupp is. He runs efficient routes, which separates, and then you catch the ball, sort of thing. So that's what I have on him, Bill. What do you think?
Yeah. So you're spot on with everything. The one thing I love that Bech does well is he is a chain mover. He is the guy on third down. He knows right where to go, right where to cut that route off to get right to the sticks. And I love that he does that.
Yes.
I love that he's got those natural ball skills, especially in contested catch situations. My comp for him is the same team. It's a Cardinal receiver. And I want to preface this. I'm not saying that he's going to have the same career as this guy, but my comp for him is Antwayne Bolden from the Arizona Cardinals. We all remember when Bolden had Fitzgerald. Bolden was that guy, 3rd and 5. Palmer or Warner looked right to him at the sticks, and he was there. He was reliable. He was right there, able to get that first down. I do also love that he's been productive against top-tier competition, which means it's going to show early on at the next level. He is a guy I have right now in my top 100 picks. So I think he's going to be that probably late 3rd, early 4th guy, because teams are going to see that production. They're going to see a guy who knows how to set up defenders, knows how to find the soft spots in a zone and get right to that first down marker. And the teams are looking for that next Cooper Kupp-esque guy that you talked about. So I agree with everything spot on.
So, Bill, question on that. So,
yeah,
I understood the comp to Bolden is that's the play style.
Yes.
Wasn't Bolden, I don't want to say significantly larger, but at least 15 or 20 pounds bigger than 215? Bolden was kind of.
He was
a little bit bulkier and a little bit heavier. And Bech can add that to his frame too. So he has the ability to add on some muscle mass too. I don't think he needs to. But
it's all good. I just wanted to make sure I understood that the comp was the play style, not body type. Right? Because sometimes we'll comp somebody with a body type and you're just going with this is how you see him play on film. And it reminds you of what you would see on film from Antwayne Wells. So I'm clarifying the comp.
Yeah. We're a little
absolutely.
Yeah, we're different in spots because I don't see him coming out of day 2. Okay. Or I don't see him coming out of the second round. I'm sorry. I think he's top 64. I have him in the top 64.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I think I'm with you. I can see it, but I think the speed is going to be the big knock for him.
For sure.
Okay, so next one is Antwayne Juice Wells from Ole Miss. 6 foot, 205. Came from James Madison, made his way up to an SEC All-American. He is absolutely one of those guys that he is physical in all phases. Thrives on contact, physical play, press him at the line. He loves to get in there. He has soft hands, though. So even though he's physical, he's got those soft hands, capable of adjusting to off-target throws. He's got excellent body control, good downfield ball tracking skills, making him a huge threat on those deeper throws. The problem is he's not a pure burner. He's not going to be that speedster guy. He's more of an explosive guy than he is fast. He also struggles with transitioning from catcher to runner. So that's why you don't see a lot of yards after the catch for Wells, because he's one of those guys that he tries to catch it and then decides. You almost see him try to decide where he wants to go with it after he's caught it rather than before. And I've noticed that his playing speed on some film, especially against SEC competition, doesn't translate to him running past defenders. It's almost more like he's trying to run through defenders because of that physicality. Even with all that said, I think he's a guy that's going to shine on day 3, especially when we get to the Senior Bowls, we get to the East-West games, the Shrine games. And my comp for him is another play style comp, Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Detroit Lions. So every team's going to be looking for that Amon-Ra St. Brown in the day 3s. He is that same type of guy. He's very physical. He's very reliable with the catch. He doesn't have that overpowering speed. Doesn't have that, burning speed like an Isaiah Bond would, but he's explosive. And I think some team's going to take him on day 3, and we're all going to look back on the class in 3 or 4 years and say, how did we let Wells get to pick 155? But Randall, how do you feel about Mr. Wells?
I agree. And when you talk about the explosiveness, like his speed on tape and his explosiveness, I mean, it kind of reminds me, my comp for him is Debo. And I know it's kind of a lazy comp, to be honest with you, but it's very funny because South Carolina has a type, right? Debo, Juice, and Xavier Legette, all in like the mass of 6-7 years. So they have a bruiser wide receiver type. But I think that his yards after catch kind of take away from his long speed because he still does produce yak. I mean, his deep shots 20 plus were 9 for 18 for 356, but 110 of them were yards after catch. That's impressive for deep shots. 90 out of his 265 on intermediate, and 316 on behind line of scrimmage. And that's where that kind of gave me that Debo is he averaged 9.9 yards after the catch behind the line of scrimmage. And that was Debo 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. So so I see that. So I don't really care about his long speed. His short speed is good. He shows it with his yards after catch. You are right, though. His transition from catch to run is clunky, and it's almost like comical to where once he gets into the NFL, they're going to be like, hey, like, here's 3 tips, and then it's gone, sort of thing. So I think that won't be too much of an issue, but it is weirdly clunky. But then it's hard to figure out. Maybe he's just waiting for like the next receiver, the closest DB to come to him, so he can truck him or something. I don't know, but.
And that's what I got too. He's very physical, and it's almost like he wants to initiate contact. Like, hey, I've caught the ball, come hit me. Yeah. And that's what I get out of it. And it's like, no, just turn up field and go.
Right.
So
yeah. So I believe that can easily be taken out of him, which is fine. I know Juice Wells, in 2022 he had 189 yards versus Arkansas. That was not fun. But all of it sounds good. I have a day 2 pick on him as well. And one thing I don't know if we talked about, he's only had 1 drop this year, and versatile route tree that he runs, and that's impressive.
Randall, did you say day 2 or day 3?
Day 2.
Got it. So you have him in your top 100.
I do. I think his style is unique to where people are looking for that.
Got it.
Yep, absolutely. So next up is Antonio Williams from Clemson, 6 foot, 187. The big things that I saw about Williams is he's got flexibility to go in the slot, go outside, and he's going to give offensive coordinators options in how they want to use him in different formations. He really separates well on option routes and over the middle. So you see a football IQ of he's going to instantly know where he needs to go. You see him being able to read those coverages on the fly, adjust routes accordingly. He's got my favorite thing that he does is his footwork off the line is so clean. You watch him, there's no trip ups, there's no missteps. He is off the line and ready to go. So he can beat press coverage very easily. He is a little bit undersized. 6 foot, 187. There is that lighter frame. He has good long speed, but it's not great. He doesn't have that 5th gear that we talk about when we talk about some of those guys at wide receiver. So he's not going to be able to threaten vertically. He's got some injury history. He's got some durability concerns that some teams are going to be sitting there on the board and saying, hey, he's going to be off our board because of these. His dip in his shortened sophomore campaign really created questions for me about how consistent he could be week in and week out, because you saw him disappear against that top flight competition. I think he has a draftable grade for me, but he is going to be one of those guys that we talk about the All-Star games, we talk about the Senior Bowls, we talk about the combines, that they're going to see that frame, they're going to see that production dip, they're going to see those durability concerns, and he's going to have to answer for those to 32 NFL GMs and show that, hey, I may be undersized and I may have durability concerns, but I still have talent when I'm on the field. He reminds me a lot of Jaden Reed for the Green Bay Packers in that same play style, that same mold, a high football IQ. He doesn't have that long speed, that burner speed, but he's that guy that you look for on 3rd and 6 at the sticks. That's what I see for Juice. But Randall, what do you see for Juice?
Everything, yeah. For Antonio Williams, everything was pretty much exactly what I saw. I did like he kind of follows as a winner. In high school, he went to Dutch Fork High School, which plays against dogs. They play against elite people as well. So he's been playing up against elite players since high school. He can be a punt returner. He can be a kick returner. I love. You are right. His freshman year, he led in receptions and yards, and then sophomore took that dip. And then with those injury concerns is where that red flag is. I can't really put it at yellow. I'm going to kind of put it at red, especially because it's an ankle and a toe that consistently lingered. And that just always worries me, to be honest with you. But I do like him in a general sense of an NFL receiver as a huge versatility guy and in routes and rushing. I kind of wrote a book on Antonio Williams because I couldn't figure him out, to be honest with you. I almost wanted to put him in, early day 3 and stuff like that. But his college has been kind of sporadic in a lot of ways that he's being used. And I'm not sure if it's a coaching thing to where they do want to use him like that. But I grabbed 2 games and what I watched was Wake Forest and Florida State. Wake Forest, it was a lot of short and intermediate routes. It was a lot of 3-4 yard hitches, slants, and things like that. And then he actually ended up having a 30-yard pass to steal the game. So that was kind of impressive that he had a passing one on that. So it was Wake Forest was a little bit of a boring game in the fact of running curls, just getting 4 yards per. And then when you looked at Florida State, he had 157 all-purpose yards where he was used in the intermediate, used a good seam route for a touchdown. That was incredible. And he was used in the rushing game as well for those all-purpose yards. So if I'm looking at, as an NFL GM, I'm looking at the Florida State game and trying to maximize his play in that Florida State game. My comp for him was Curtis Samuel in that fact where he does excel in the intermediate routes and the deep if he's used, and he can surprise people with those, which I love. His speed is a little bit rough, and I'm interested to see how it happens, but I do have a mid day 3 grade on him. I think he's definitely draftable as long as the NFL GMs kind of look at him in the sense of a utility gadget player, and then growing from there.
I like that you added in the utility player, and I believe it's Savion Williams.
Yes.
Is another utility player, but he's not in this episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
But Savion Williams is a rich man's Antonio Williams. Is that where it goes?
Yeah. I mean,
I will say,
didn't start using him in the run game till 3 weeks ago, Savion.
Yeah. I will say Antonio Williams is probably the number one receiver so far that we've talked about, where his medicals at the combine are going to be one of the most talked about, because those medicals are going to be the difference from him being a day 3, maybe even a late day 2 guy, to being completely undraftable. How teams look at those with that toe, with that ankle injury, that's going to be huge for him.
Yeah, definitely the second half of the season will help as well, as long as he ascends.
Yep. Absolutely. So,
I believe
all right, Bill.
This is another one of my guys. This is one of those guys. Michael Sturdivant, 6'3", 205 from UCLA. He is one of those guys. He is an athletic type of guy. He made Bruce Feldman's 2023 freak list. And for those that don't know what it is, the Feldman freak list is essentially a list put together of players that do extraordinary things, either in terms of speed, in terms of power, in terms of both. Sturdivant's topped out at 23 miles an hour running, bench press close to 300 pounds, squatted almost 400 pounds at 6'3". You can't teach size and speed. You can teach a lot of things, but you can't teach size and you can't teach speed. With that size and speed, though, he's a long strider, eats up that cushion quickly, and he can threaten defenses vertically over the top. He also has the basketball box out skills. He can box out defenders very easily on contested catches, particularly in the red zone. And he's versatile enough to line up both outside and the slot. The big thing is he's got to improve consistency in his hands. There's been a lot of concentration drops that have been issues throughout his career. His route tree is still developing with room for some serious improvement, especially on crossers over the middle, on out routes over the middle. And his after the catch ability seems a little bit limited. It's almost like he's going down on first contact rather than creating additional yardage. With all that being said, when I evaluate players, big pluses for me are size and speed, because you can't teach it. I'm a physical traits kind of guy. With that being said, he is a guy that is in my top 64 right now. I don't think he makes it out of round 2. And my comp for him is Christian Watson from the Green Bay Packers. Same play style, big body receiver who's got the speed. It's not super long speed. It's not like a burner type, but it's straight line speed. And he's a developmental guy that you get him on that day 2. You help him work on those consistency with those catches. But it's one of those things. With his speed, you could put him at punt returner. You could put him at kick returner. I think he probably runs a 4.35. And at 6'3", 205, he's going to be one of those receivers that we turn on the combine, and he runs it, and then everybody is scrambling for UCLA tape. The other big thing is he's also the son of a former NFL player and the nephew of Hall of Famer Floyd Little. So he has NFL bloodlines. So he's one of those guys that if I'm an NFL GM, if he's on the board, I'm flipping the table, I'm sprinting the card out the door. I'll walk it up to Goodell myself if I can and say, I want him on my roster. But that's enough of me gushing about Mr. Sturdivant. Randall, how do you feel about the UCLA wideout?
Yeah, I think that I'm just going to maybe say a couple things and then ask you a question because you'll be able to probably answer it better. I do agree. I think a 6'3" foot man at 205 that's going to run a 4.35 at the combine is going to, the wind will flip the hats off the GM sort of thing. That's going to be huge. Just being able to burn 5'11", 6 foot DBs at 6'3" is really don't need separation at that point. Concentration drops can be an issue, but I really looked at his 2023 tape basically to evaluate him because 2024 wasn't in the prime. I mean, the Minnesota game was 7-107, but at Boise State, like I watched the Boise State 5 for 142 for a touchdown, and that's where I kind of saw who he should be in the NFL sort of thing. And in 2023, he had 30 targets deep, with 10 receptions at 37.3 a reception, which is nuts, and then just one drop, which was impressive. So my question to you is when I watched the Minnesota game, his short routes were good, but they played back on him. They played soft coverage against him, and it was a relatively easy game for him to get 7-107 because it was soft coverage, and his routes weren't really needed as much because it was a quick curl or a quick slant, and it was easy for him to kind of gain that 170 yards. The Boise State game was incredible. Do you think that his slants and his curls will translate to the NFL? Because sometimes I see a little bit of clunk, and I'd rather not have Sturdivant be a one-trick pony.
So I'm with you. That was one of my biggest things is those short routes. It's mainly when he breaks off the ball. So when he breaks in the curl, when he breaks, it's a little clunky. There is room for development though. So it's not like it's completely broken. Right. It's one of those things that an offensive coordinator is going to bring him in and say, okay, I watched that Boise State tape and I see a guy that if I send him 10, 15 yards down the middle, he's going to come down with it. Would you like to see him work on those curls and those slants? Yes. And I think that's why he's not a first round guy right now and why he's in the top 64, but he's not in the top 32 is because he still has those. He is one of those guys that I'm really intrigued to see at the Senior Bowl in one-on-one rep competition. I want to see those breaks off the line. I want to see how he does with hand fighting against press coverage, and I want to see how he does when he gets away and has to create separation with those curls and can't just box out a receiver. But I'm with you. It's a little clunky. Another knock on him that's been out there has been his production so far this season. I don't think that's all necessarily him. Part of it is the UCLA quarterback Garbers. I'm not in love with his arm. I'm not in love with his accuracy, but that's a whole nother episode of a podcast that we could sit here and talk about. Yep. But you watch the Minnesota game this season and the Boise State game last season. I think that's what he can be, is he can be that burner guy, even going all the way back to the Central Carolina game where he went 5 catches, 136 yards. He's a big play threat at 6'3" that can run a 4.3. Some offensive coordinator is going to say, hey, I'm not worried if he can run a curl route. I'll just send him on vertical routes every game, every time, and that's all I need for him to do.
Honestly, that's kind of where my head was at sort of thing. And then, run those routes, meaningful routes, those go routes. And then once in a while, you might be the third or fourth read, but run that curl, right, in the game sort of thing. Yep. So you probably won't get the ball. But still, do it in the NFL. Right, I didn't even watch much. I watched the Minnesota game, but then I just went straight to his 2023 tape because I think that's what's deserving of him. But other than the Browns, where would you want to see him go? That would utilize him correctly.
Obviously, I'd want to see him go to the Browns, of course, but it's going to need to be a team that's got a strong arm quarterback that can get him the ball down the field. I'm going to flip the script. I say Buffalo. Give Josh Allen that deep threat wide receiver. If I have a wide receiver room of Keon Coleman on one side, Sturdivant on the other, and then if Cooper does return for you guys, then now you have Cooper here. But imagine just deep throws to Josh Allen, from Josh Allen to Sturdivant down the middle. It's going to have to be someone that's got that strong arm quarterback, but you also need an established wide receiver opposite him that's great in the short and intermediate game that he's not great in. So you're going to need that guy that can run those curl routes, that can run those out routes. But the Bills could be a possibility. Another team that could be a possibility is Baltimore with Lamar Jackson and his arm as well, and their need for wide receiver. Another sneaky one that I'll throw out there, the Rams, having him stay in Los Angeles. If you obviously you have
one out there.
Go ahead.
Everything I'm hearing screams Mike McDaniel, Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins don't need a receiver, right? Mm-hmm. They've got two really good ones.
Yes, but I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean,
the Dolphins don't need one. Yeah, but it's a track meet down there in South Beach, and if you get him down there, it's a track meet. But Randall, what do you think about that one?
Dolphins? Yeah, I mean, I kind of actually thought the Dolphins too, Jim. I'm not going to lie to you, because they do. I think that 6'3" frame would help in defenses now trying to adjust instead of for Miami just pulling press zone, hit Tyreek off the line, and then go from there. You can't play press at that point unless you're just playing press on Tyreek, which then you kind of have to play halves, 2 different defenses on each half sort of thing, so it could be confusing. That would work, and it's going to pain me to say it because I also don't like this team even though they're NFC, but I think he'd fit really well with the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys with him on the other side of CD to open up CD and not have to force CD to do deep shots and short and intermediate. Sturdivant can take over that position in that deep shots and open up. I mean, Sturdivant might not have the best rookie season numbers, but he's pulling people for CD in itself.
Yep.
I like
and
that.
I'll piggyback on that one, and then we'll slide over into corners. Let's stay in the NFC East and go to the Commanders. Put him next to Terry McLaurin.
Right.
And watch Jaden Daniels throw those deep balls that he did at LSU right to Sturdivant.
Yes.
So, all right. Moving into cornerbacks. So, Domani Jackson, 6'1", 190 from Alabama. I know we just talked about Sturdivant's blazing speed, but somehow Domani Jackson is faster. He's a guy that I think is going to challenge for that 40-yard dash record this season at the Combine. He runs probably a 4.28. I could see him getting down faster, the 4.25, 4.24 range. But not only is he speedy, he's physical. He's got good height, and he can match up with taller receivers effectively with that physicality. He's very versatile in both man and zone schemes, so he's not one of those guys that specializes in either or. His athleticism, though, it raises his ceiling for me significantly for him. The big things that I have a knock on him for is his tackling technique. It's very loose. It's very arm tackle-ish. The other big thing is his injury history, a significant knee injury in high school. He's been relatively healthy at Alabama, but obviously that knee injury going back to high school, as well as some of the smaller banged up, it's going to raise some durability questions. And the big thing is his production doesn't match the athleticism. So you see a guy with this type of speed, this type of coverage skills, and this body at 6'1", 190, he should be more productive in terms of tackles, in terms of interceptions, but you don't see that from Domani. But that's, of course, obviously, going back to me, I value physical traits, I value speed, I value body. I have a round 3 grade. I think he's a top 100 prospect right now. He reminds me a lot of Xavier Rhodes from the Minnesota Vikings in the aspect of it's a very physical guy. It's a very speedy guy. He does need to work, obviously, on tackling technique. His coverage skills, while they are NFL ready, could use some refinement because it's almost like it's very clunky and it's very broken in the fact that he pretty much leaves his athleticism behind while he uses his coverage skills rather than using it to support his coverage skills. But Randall, how do you feel about Mr. Domani?
That was, pretty much perfectly done. If we keep doing these podcasts together, then our scouting reports are going to look exactly the same, Bill. But yeah, I obviously, as I said on Twitter today that I believe it was today, that I do believe he'll run the fastest 40 for 2025 draft. He's quick. It shows everywhere. He started at USC. I do believe that was because of his knee injury, because it was his senior year. So started at USC and then got to Alabama, which is great. You're right. The clunkiness that I see as well, which I'm curious to see how it goes from college to NFL and if they make him adjust and fix it, is his footwork and his back pedal. His back pedal is pretty clunky, but he doesn't lose much ground on it, or if any. It works for him. So I'm curious to see if NFL is going to make him tweak out of it and get back to more fluidity on it, or if they're just like UBU sort of thing. I have a question on that. His zone coverage, I think he does need to learn the game a little bit more. Man press is definitely his bread and butter. If you watched I'm glad that he is playing in 2024, because if you watch the game against Washington last year, it kind of showed all of his flaws, which again, they're minute flaws, but he did get burned there a good amount of times. It was kind of almost like a Denzel Burke game this year, but I'm glad that he's got another year. He's got another year to show who he really is.
Yeah.
But I do agree, the production, you're 100% right about the production. He should have more in that stat sheet, even though he's only allowing, a 43.3% completion percentage when it goes to him. But you're 6'1", almost 200 pounds and lightning speed. Let's see you ball hawk those balls or force some fumbles. Give me something, sort of thing. So That's what I would like to see. I think I couldn't. And this is a question that may not make sense, but I hope you understand it.
Yes.
So when we're looking at the 2025 class of cornerbacks, there's a bubble that look like the elite to me. Travis Hunter, Will Johnson, Benjamin Morris, so on and so forth. Where does that elite 2020 cornerback bubble stop? And then where do you begin a second bubble?
Oh, that's a great question, and I get where you're coming from. So I think the bubble probably stops, that first bubble probably stops right after the guys that you mentioned, Travis Hunter, Will Johnson, Ben Morrison. I'll put one other guy in there. We're going to put a pin in him because we're going to talk about him this episode. He'll be there. And then after that, I think you have that second bubble of guys. I think there's probably 4 elite guys, maybe a 5th one in Siobhan Revel from ECU.
That's what I was going to say.
I have a feeling that Revel's going to come back because of the injury. If he comes out, he'll be in that bubble, but I have a feeling he's going to come back. Domani would probably be the start of that next second bubble. But again, the big concern, like we talked about, you have all of these physical traits and these athletic traits, but I don't see production from you. Use the tools in your toolbox to produce. And I don't see that.
So you could see Domani Jackson in the back end of round 1?
I could. With his body size, with his athletic talents, he is everything that NFL teams look for when you look for those athletic corners. The problem is he doesn't know how to effectively use those talents yet. So he's still trying to learn that. The other big, we'll call it orange flag, is that knee injury that he suffered, because it's going to be a big question. How well is that knee put together? Is there a risk for injury? Was it just a knee injury? Was it an ACL? Was it a meniscus? I haven't gotten too deep into it because obviously it happened back in high school, bled into his first year at USC. But I could see him creeping up there, especially as we go through the Shrine Bowls, the Senior Bowls, the All-Star games, when teams see a guy 6'1", 190 that's got blazing speed like this. Some GM somewhere can say, hey, I can fix the coverage issues. I can fix the technical issues. I can't fix his speed. And somebody somewhere is going to convince themselves, probably right there in that 27 to 33 range in the tail end of round 1, start of round 2, and say, hey, let me go ahead and pick him up.
Yeah, and I will say that he, unlike some super fast 6'1" cornerbacks like Sauce Gardner, Kyer Elam, he's not as grabby on press as he is with those two, which I love, because that is something that's very hard to teach out of, especially when you're new and round 1 grade, as you'll stick with that. He's not as grabby to cause penalties, and I do like seeing that.
Yep, absolutely. So the next one we're going to talk about is Will Lee III from Texas A&M. This is a big body wide receiver, 6'3", 190 pounds. He's very rangy. He can disrupt passing lanes with that 6'3" body. I love his hip swivel and his back pedal. You watch him turn and run with wide receivers. A guy at 6'3" should not be able to turn as smoothly as he does, but he's able to turn, run, and go with those guys. But he's also very physical. He jams receivers effectively, disrupts timing routes. Big ball hawk mentality. He is the guy that's going to go after the ball. He is going to hunt that ball down. He's going to seek it. He's a very sure tackler. He wraps up well in space. My biggest concern is he is one of the slower guys, probably looking at a 4.55, 4.56, 40-yard dash time. It's going to be exploited at the next level. In addition to that, he's obviously 190 pounds, but it's 6'3". It's lean. Like we talked about at Horton at the start of the episode, it's very lean frame. It's going to be exploited, especially by physical wide receivers. And his zone coverage skills are lagging far behind his man coverage. In man-to-man coverage, he is great. In zone coverage, he loses positioning way too often, and I don't know if it's because of the light frame, if it's because of technique issues, or a combination of the two. But for Will Lee, I'm going to go back to the Vikings well again because they've taken entirely too many corners this decade. But Cameron Dantzler, Michigan State corner that ended up in Minnesota, kind of the same style, great at man coverage, needed some issues with zone coverage, kind of big and lanky. I think he is a day 3 guy. I think he's probably smack dab in the middle of round 5. But Randall, how do you see Will Lee playing out?
Yeah, honestly, all that was great. To be honest, that's kind of why I had 2. Obviously, his nickname is the Blanket, and I love that ego because then was it 2023 when it was Texas A&M versus Missouri? He sent Theo Wease. He sent Theo Wease a blanket, and actually showed up. I mean, the second half wasn't as great as the first half because he left them to 0 catches in the first half, and then I think Theo Wease ended up getting 71 and a touchdown in the second half. But that ego is something that you need in a cornerback. Cornerback's one of the hardest positions to play. You got to have that ego to play, so I do love that. But everything else you said, yeah, the 40 times bad, and as you said, it shows up on tape as well. So it's not like we're kind of crossing our fingers. When that 40 comes, expectations will probably be expectations sort of thing. I would be interested in that 6'3" frame and a little bit slower is I think he could move to safety eventually, or maybe if an NFL team talks to him about him playing safety, I think he could be better in that position for the NFL. Just probably start off as a cornerback and then move to safety so he can learn zone coverages. Because you are right, he also gets lost in open space a little bit sometimes. So after he learns the NFL, I think he could be a better safety than a cornerback. And I think he's a good value in day 3. As a GM, I wouldn't take him in day 2, and I'd hope that he's there when my team's ready to pick in day 3, maybe 4 or 5.
Yep, absolutely. I will ask you this, Randall. How much do you think him having that offensive or defensive line in front of him with guys like Scourton and the Shamars help his tape?
It helps, of course, because front four is amazing. The trenches are where games are won. Looking at reps outside of just his targets, he still does well on that outside, and he's still kind of, my favorite thing is his planting feet and changing direction. So as long as he doesn't get lost, his route running, knowing the routes and things along those lines, when he finds out what route it is, he can overstep that wide receiver and take over his position before the wide receiver gets to it. So that's like one of my favorite things about that. I would say there's always a good thing to have a great front four, but I'm not going to take it away from him ultimately. How about you?
I'm the same way. He is one of those guys that front four is really helping him against some of the other wide receivers, but it's not going to take away from him. My only concern is obviously when he gets to the NFL, the defensive line that's going to be in front of him is not going to have a first round and 2 potential first rounds as well in that defensive line. So that's where you need those skills, the man coverage skills, and especially in space because he's going to be put on an island. I think as a GM, if I'm taking him, I think his first year, 2 years, he is exclusively a slot guy or he's a safety. It's going to be the conversation. Do you want to play slot or do you want to play safety? He doesn't have that long speed right now to be able to keep up on the outside.
I agree. Yeah, slot or safety is definitely the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So next up is Gentry Williams, the cornerback from the University of Oklahoma, 6 feet, 187 pounds. This is another one of those guys that is a burner. We are talking some serious speed. I think he's going to run sub 4.3. And I'm curious to see how we look at that corner at that combine because he just blows by folks. But not only that, he also has very loose hips and smooth transitions. You watch his back pedal and how he transitions out of it. He mirrors routes very well. He's scheme versatile. He can play outside. He can play in the slot. So he has value to the defensive packages for defensive coordinators. He has a track pedigree, so he's an explosive athlete. And really what I like is that he has the makeup speed to recover when he's been beat. He also tracks the ball well, and he has a natural skill for forcing turnovers. My big concern is he is very, very subpar in run support. He takes poor angles, struggles to disengage from blocks. His tackling technique needs significant refinement. To be quite honest, it is almost unplayable at the next level with his run support. And that is a red push pin for me.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, on his passing coverage, he's very well at. He is a guy. He does also have red flags from an injury perspective. He's missed time at college. He's missed time going back to high school, so there's durability concerns there. He is a day 3 guy for me, and he reminds me a lot of Jamel Dean from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a guy that's very good in man coverage and in passing coverages. But when you get into those run supports, he is just almost unplayable on that aspect. But Randall, I'll turn it over to you. How do you feel about Gentry?
No, I mean, I definitely agree with pretty much everything. I do think the one thing that I do love about him is I do think that his, because he played quarterback in high school, I think he really understood the game at quarterback really, really well, which then translated to the cornerback position in itself. You can tell that the way his brain operates is almost like a quarterback playing in a cornerback position with his route recognition and his very much understanding of plays with screens and flats. He kind of sees the motions, understands it, and knows when it's a screen or a flat. So I do like that. And then he kind of unfortunately misses the tackle, which is super unfortunate. My red push pin is his injuries. I mean, he's missing the rest of the year this year with the shoulder. He had a knee injury in high school. He had another he got surgery in 2023, right, for a labrum. And then
I believe it was a torn labrum. Yeah.
Yep, he was out, and then in 2024 re-aggravated it, and now is out for the rest of the year. He does have one more year of eligibility. I very much think he should stay in Oklahoma. He's from Tulsa, so it's hometown hero sort of thing. I think he should try and get a full year of Oklahoma next year under his belt, and I think he could turn into that late day 2, early day 3, or unless he immediately, ascends like crazy, then he could change. But I think his best plan of action would be to play next year in Oklahoma.
Yep, absolutely. I agree. Get a clean bill of health and a clean bill of tape as well, just so in that way he can have that. So next up on the board is Denver Harris, the cornerback from University of Texas, San Antonio, or UTSA. 6 foot, 190. This guy, it bears repeating again. Tonight's a fast episode. It is speed. He is a guy that's got blazing speed. We're talking probably running 4.3. I would say he could push 4.35, 4.34 in the 40-yard dash time. He also has a high football IQ. You see him being able to process routes quickly, shows potential for pattern matching and zone coverages, matching routes on the fly. He also has a natural ball skill and timing on a pass breakup. He's got very good eye discipline. He stays with those receivers. He also is battle-tested against SEC competition, played at LSU before coming to UTSA, so he's played against that higher-level competition and is an instinctive playmaker. The big concern is he is severely undersized. It's 6 foot 190 is what he's listed at. when I watch the tape, I don't see a 190 guy. I see a 170, 175 guy. I see a guy that has that smaller body. He is also, we just talked about it with Williams. I'm going to talk about it with Harris. It is poor tackling technique and a poor willingness to tackle. That is a red flag for me. I've seen tackles where he either takes a bad angle or he just out and out says, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
He's one of the few players that I have a character concern flag for. Multiple transfers, multiple suspensions. It is going to be one of those guys when he gets in front of those GMs, they're going to ask him about why did he leave LSU and why did he get suspended and all of those things. I think on just pure athleticism and pure talent alone, he's draftable, but it's late in the 7th round. It is almost near the undrafted free agent. He reminds me a lot of a Christian Fulton from Titans Chargers days, where you have a guy who's very athletic. He's good in coverage, but there is a struggle, obviously, in run support. But I think NFL GMs are going to be sitting there saying, hey, I have a guy who's undersized, a guy who doesn't want to tackle, a guy who has bad tackling technique. He has character concerns from suspensions and transfers. They're going to take him off his board entirely.
Yep.
So I could see it. But, Randall, what do you think about Denver?
Yeah. I mean, the back pedal and the fluid hips are really good. He's a good cerebral player and a ball hawk while playing. I do, he was a 5-star recruit out of high school. He was number 25 in 2022. So he was no joke coming out of high school. People were searching for him. So, and then, those concerns came up, which, I mean, from what I've read, it's a lot of in-house fighting, which is not ideal sort of thing. Texas A&M to LSU to UTSA. 2024, he did have a pressure, which was decent, and that showed his speed, which was a lot of fun. So that's something that could be instilled into the NFL, which I would kind of like to see him do, because that was a really good rep. He is good on the field. It's a big red flag for me on the character concerns, and I don't like to harp on character concerns because we don't know what kids go through on a daily basis and things along those lines. I do know that Denver Harris doesn't have to enter the draft next year, but I think he should, because I don't think college will do him good anymore. I think he should get into a locker room with a bunch of grown men who got to feed kids and have them teach him the game as it goes. I do believe that you're right. I think people will draft him in the 7th round because he was a 5-star recruit in high school. He's extremely athletic. He has the traits to do it. Whoever is the NFL coach whoever's developing him just needs to make sure that he's attached to the hip for the first 2 years and develop correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. So next up on the board is Daylen Everette, the cornerback from Georgia. So 6'1", 190. He's got good length for the position. And even though he's 6'1", 190, he has the ability to add mass on his frame. He's not fully fleshed out as a corner. He's got natural feel for zone spacing, route combinations. He's that guy that has that really good football IQ and seems to be in the receiver's head and know where they're going before they're going there. He also shows a really good plant and drive ability on those underbreaking routes, so you can see him drive towards the ball. He also is a willing run defender. He's a guy that's going to fill an alley in a hurry. He is not afraid to get down there in the Oklahoma drill and mix it up with a running back running downhill. The big thing is he's a little over aggressive for me. He bites on double moves very consistently. Play action fakes are a problem. Even though he's a willing tackler, his technique is a problem. It's inconsistent, especially in space. And he's another one of those guys where he's got these athletic traits, but the production doesn't line up. Like, it's just not there. Mm-hmm. So for him, he's still a draftable guy for me, but it's further down the board. It's a day 3 guy. He reminds me a lot of Drake Kirkpatrick from the Cincinnati Bengals, a guy who had the athleticism, who was a willing tackler, needed some help with some technique type of things. But he's another one of these guys that we see, he's got all the athletic skills in the world, but it's not lining up with production. So I'd be curious to see how other teams are viewing that. But Randall, how do you view Daylen?
I think I might be high on Daylen Everette, a little bit higher than you are, but I'm not sure. Would you have him as where do you see him getting drafted?
So it's around 6-7 range. So it's in that middle towards the end of day 3. So it's one of those ones where a team's going to see him on the board and love that athletic trait. but not necessarily go reaching for him early.
Okay. Yeah, I have a first 10 of day 3 sort of thing. I have him in the 4th. I'm pretty high on him. I do really like his mirror for wide receivers with his size and his speed. I think he does very well in that. He does need to learn more of the wide receiver routes, because my one big flaw for him is those bites on the double take. You are 100% right on that, on the double moves. He bites. Yeah. And his missed tackle rate, he does tackle well, but this year his missed tackle rate, he has 7 missed tackles at 22%, so that's definitely high. I like to see how he was in 2023 versus 2024, even on a statistical standpoint. He had an 88% completion rate in 2023, dropped that down to 53% in 2024. So he did take a big jump from 2023 to 2024, which I do love. And in 2024, he played about 15 to 20% in the box. So that run support is there for him, which I do love to see at 6'1", 190.
So if he's a corner playing in the box, is he a slot or is he a boundary?
Slot when he's in the box.
Right, but does he play both? That was my question.
Yeah.
Does he play both? Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, as I said, his stats don't tell the full story either, as you said, but he does show up in decent games. I mean, he did have an interception in the Orange Bowl versus Florida State. So that was a great interception, and he doesn't shy away from that. What else? While he was playing, I was watching the Clemson game, and it didn't really tell the story either. When he was playing against Clemson, he was sticky on those receivers, but Antonio Williams and Brenningstool were making insane catches. So it was like, I was watching it, I was like, what else could you do in that situation, right? So it was just a good game by them and not by him. So I have a early 4th on him, and I would like to see what he does in the Senior Bowl and how that operates. But I'm pretty high on Daylen Everette. I think he's a good corner that can be versatile in that back room.
Yep. Absolutely. So next one, we're going to go a little bit smaller school. We're going to go Kendall Bohler, the corner from Florida A&M. 6 foot, 195 for Kendall. And like we talked about with Sturdivant earlier, Kendall is an athlete. Made Bruce Feldman's 2023 Freaks List, which if you're not too familiar with that, what the Feldman's Freak List is it is a list of players all across the country that coaches and teams have put together where these players do outstanding things. I'll just run them off for you. Bohler clocked a 4.3 40-yard dash time, broad jumped 10 feet, did 4.18 in the pro agility drill, 7 seconds in the L-style drill. He's power cleaned 335 yards. He's squatted 530 pounds. This man is an Avengers-level threat as an athlete, folks. It can't be understated. He's got also the length to emerge as a starter 2 or 3 years down the line. I love his anticipation skills. He's very explosive. He's got a downhill burst. In a zone scheme, he could be a star. He's also very good in zone coverage, showing great understanding of routes where they break off, the ability to close quickly. My biggest weakness on him is he doesn't maintain that inside leverage in man coverage. He is not a press corner. He will not press or jam receivers. He just either it's a technique issue or it's a size concern. Haven't quite delved that much into the tape to figure it out. But he also has trouble tracking the ball down the field. And he doesn't seem to have those ball skills to break up plays. I'm not sure if it's just because he hasn't seen that level of competition where he's needed it yet, but he's been very susceptible to those double moves. I think right now he is a day 3 guy. He is a guy that someone's going to see all of these athletic traits and all of this speed and power and jumping and a super athlete. He's going to be one of those guys we're talking about at the combine that's at the top of every cornerback board. He's at the top of the 40. He's at the top of the press. He's at the top of the bench press. He's at the top of the power clean. And everybody's like, where did this kid come from? With that being said, there are some things fundamentally he's got to work on. He reminds me a lot of an Isaiah Oliver from the Falcons Jets corner. Very athletic guy who needed some – he's basically a block of clay that a cornerback room and a defensive coordinator can mold into a star. But with that being said, Randall, how do you feel about Kendall?
Yeah, Yeah, I kind of feel the same. The broad jump, I think, was 11 feet, right? Which is even more
Yeah,
impressive.
yeah. I believe it was almost 11. I
It's
think
like
it clocked in at 10 feet 11
10 feet,
inches,
11
right
inches.
at 11.
Yeah. We're gonna push that to 11.
Mhm.
But he is. I mean, honestly, perfectly said, is he is a ball of clay at that point. So I see him as a late day 3, maybe an immediate UDFA pickup at the end of the draft, sort of thing. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Other than obviously he does have sticky coverage, completion percentage is great and everything. His Miami game, when I watched the reps in Miami, I was just hoping that even Florida A&M was going to be like, hey, let's kind of show your stuff because you're playing Miami. But he played soft consistently and he got beat up on Miami. Even if I understood that it would be rough for him that game, but I didn't see much to show me that he should get drafted in the day 3 in that game. And I kind of was hoping he was going to showcase it, but that could have been a coaching standpoint of the game, of the scheme and game plan, opposed to his ability. Did you watch that game and did you have anything about that?
I did. I watched that game, and I'm with you. I saw that obviously when we look at the Miami receivers, you look at the speedy guys, the Restrepos of the world,
Right.
and Kendall has the ability to keep up with him. So I was curious why the defensive coordinator didn't play him up on the line. We talked about Bohler. He has issues with press coverage in terms of creating that jam at the line, and I'm not sure if it's just he's not experienced with hand fighting or he
Right.
has technique concerns because he can turn and run and then keep up with those guys. So I was curious too as to why they played him so far back. I think that's going to be one of those tapes where a defensive coordinator is going to look at it and say, this is what we do not do with him. And we put him up on the line. We put him in the slot, especially as well, and have him just right on top of it.
For sure.
Because the thing is with Kendall, even if he's beat off of that press coverage, he's got the speed and acceleration to catch right back up.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm getting at it, sort of thing, is like, I think he just needs to be coached and developed differently than the status quo that he's kind of running in college and just using him to his strengths at Florida A&M when he should be more like a ball of clay. And that's what I hoped out of the Miami game, is because it did get out of hand pretty quickly. So in the third or fourth quarter, just be like, hey, let's put you on press and let's see how you do up against these. So you have tape to learn from and for recruits coming into the draft. So I think that ball of clay is perfect and he should play in the NFL based on that.
Yep, absolutely. I agree. So next one, we're going to go to Tommi Hill, the cornerback out of Nebraska, 6 foot, 205. I really love him. He is a Swiss Army knife for creative defensive coordinators. This is a guy who can play outside. He can play inside. He really excels in zone coverage. He anticipates routes well. He is always in a position to make a play on the ball. He's in the right place at the right time. He also has experience as a kick returner. He's a willing tackler. He is a guy that you put on your roster and you find a spot for him somewhere, whether it's a gunner on special teams or it's in a cornerback room or it potentially even at wide receiver. You could put him on the offensive side of the ball. He is that good. He's the guy that has that talent. The big concern is that he only has one full season as a starting cornerback. He is raw in terms of those defensive snaps. He is a guy that's going to need time to develop technique, positional instincts. He also is very unreliable in his performance. It's been up and down throughout his entire college career. Part of that is because he's only got that one full season, so he's still learning to play the cornerback position. He also is a little bit limited in man-to-man coverage. I'm not a fan of his man-to-man coverage, of his back pedal and his hip turn in that man-to-man. I think he's a better zone type of guy. That being said, he is a guy that I could look for on that day 3 range. And I will compare him in terms of play style to a former Nebraska Cornhusker cornerback that went in the first round, Prince Amukamara from the New York Giants. In that same style, he was much better in zone than he was in man. He was very athletic and had those skills, but he needed work on his man coverage. I think he's one of those things. He's got to be in a very zone-heavy scheme where you can just pop him in a cover 3 zone coverage, say this is your area, and if the ball comes to you, he'll take it away. With that being said, Randall, how about you take it away on Tommi Hill?
Yeah. I do love his measurables. Like 6 foot 205 is amazing, as well as I think he will run a 4.40. And I believe his combine is going to be fun, where his shuttle might not be the greatest, but its vertical is going to be pretty decent. I think he'll have a 36-inch vertical and then a 4.440, which will be good, especially with his long arms. I think his combine, I think his backpedal and react and the L is not going to be great at the combine, but I think everything else will be. And I think that might put a notch on his draft where he goes in the draft. But everything else I do really love. I do kind of love that he's raw in playing wide receiver and cornerback, understanding, especially in that zone. As you said, his zone is great because of his wide receiver, like literally playing wide receiver last year, right? So, so I do love seeing that. And then, you know, we talked about today on Twitter about what Nebraska put Tommi Hill on Travis Hunter by himself versus Colorado. And they just said, hey, you got Travis Hunter, which is a tall task. And he did play very well. He was sticky on Travis. There was a lot of times where Travis was the first read and Shedeur had to look the other way, sort of thing. So that tape alone, I think, is going to help him in that regard. I think, again, with his wide receiver presence, covering the flat is really good. He's aggressive on the line. I think he can play well. Do you see him in a potential nickel spot, or do you think he should always play outside?
I think he could play in the nickel spot. I do. I think before he gets in that nickel spot, he's got to improve on that man coverage a little bit because in that nickel, he's going to get pushed around. But I think he could play in the nickel at the next level. But I'm going to ask this about Tommi Hill because we always talk about Travis Hunter potentially playing both ways at the next level. Do you think there's a team out there that could look at Tommi Hill and say, hey, I don't want to spend the rich draft capital on Travis Hunter, but I have a guy like Tommi Hill who's played both positions? Do you see a team maybe throwing a day 3 pick and trying to play him both ways?
I never thought about that, but I pray that's what happens. I think that'd be incredible, to be honest with you, to have two in the same draft kind of come out in that versatility, like firm versatility of wide receiver cornerback. I think that would be a lot of fun. He can do it. I watched not a lot, but I watched some of his wide receiver reps. They're not bad. I mean, he looks good. He can do it. So I think that'd be a lot of fun. I'm in for that. Count me in.
Yep.
Well, and let me throw one more thing out there at you, right? So most teams are going to carry 5 or 6 corners, and most teams carry 5 wide receivers, and a few carry 6. So if you have the 6th wide receiver and your 6th corner is the same guy, and he plays special teams, he is helping the coach with a roster spot, right? Yeah. Because realistically, that 5th wide receiver isn't going to see the field very much on offense. Like you might get 5 snaps, right? Like it's are you doing teams and you're saving a spot on the 53?
Yeah. I think that's a great point. That's a great point.
I agree.
And Jim, that's your wheelhouse, by the way.
That's true.
I am always an outside perspective. So just for everybody listening, like there's like Randall and Bill having a conversation, and I'm always going to be out there. That's who I am. So
yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's wrap up. Let's get to the main event. The big finish, and it's Tacario Davis from the University of Arizona, 6'4", 190. He is a guy, he's very physical at the line of scrimmage. He's very powerful in his hands. He's got excellent instincts and anticipation. He can read and react with receivers quickly. He is one of the guys in this class that can do both man coverage and zone coverage. Stays low in his back pedal. He's a tackler that when he tackles someone, he tackles someone. It's not breaking out of his tackles. The big thing with him is his long speed is a little bit average. He's probably going to run in that 4.55, 4.56 range in the 40-yard dash, so he may be a liability against your faster receivers. He can be overly aggressive at times and very grabby from what I've seen, especially in press coverage. He gets very grabby. I would love to see him improve his route combination understanding and his overall vision as a corner, but he is a guy that's very physical. I have right now him as an early 2nd round grade. He is right outside that top 32. Right out. He could slip into the 1st round for the right team. And he reminds me a lot of Tariq Woolen from the Seattle Seahawks, a very very physical, get in your face, gritty type of cornerback. I think this is after we talk about the top three guys and Travis Hunter and Will Johnson and Ben Morrison. Tacario Davis is that next tier of guys at cornerback. He is that right now cornerback 4, but I think he is a guy that could rise right up into that top 3, and we could talk about him as a first-round prospect as we move through the draft process. But Randall, how do you feel about Tacario Davis?
Yeah, my last sentence right here. Early day 2 pick, may climb to the first as of now. His size and length will be coveted, and his testing might put him in the first round. So, but yeah, me and you have the same page. I do love everything about him. His 2023 was ranked 5th in all Power 5 in incompletion rate, which was 27.8%. So he was top 5 in that in 2023, and his 2024 tape is showing that as well. His one flaw is getting turned around a little bit, being 6'4" and 190. When he played against Utah, happened twice, and that's where his flaw came from. Played press, got burned on a little bit of a twitch. He turned his back, got lost, sort of thing. So that's probably his only flaw to me, which is here nor there, and I'm being kind of minuscule and minute. But his long speed definitely is a flaw where he has to regain it. But I think he's smart enough to where that won't happen too consistently, and he'll be able to develop in the year 1, not mirroring wide receiver 1s, but wide receiver 2s in the NFL, and I think that will help him. So yeah, I love everything about him. I agree with you. He is he could jump in that first bubble, but he's number 1 in that second bubble, and he could be a first round grade by the draft.
Yep, absolutely, I agree.
So one comment that I like to make about this year's cornerback class, right? So you guys talked about 3 guys in that top 3. Well, so Travis Hunter, Benjamin Morrison, and Will Johnson. Right?
Johnson.
Yep.
Okay. So Travis Hunter to me is playing wide receiver. It's all about dollars and cents. So we may like his film at corner. The checkbook is going to like wide receiver, right?
Yep.
Okay. Fair.
Will Johnson is injured. Benjamin Morrison is injured. Tacario Davis theoretically could be cornerback 1 if you need to draft somebody that you know is going to be ready week 1 of the NFL season. Right? So meaning like if your team, if your GM or your coach is on a hot seat, do you take the risk at a higher ranked prospect who may not be ready week 1? Or is your choice Tacario Davis?
So are you directly talking about the Giants right now?
I'm just making a statement because
Giants, Raiders, Jaguars.
Right. But that's it, right? If the Giants are taking a quarterback in the first round, would Joe Shane rather have somebody that's going to contribute at 100% health week 1 to show, because obviously their secondary is is poor versus their front 4. Does he take somebody 100% healthy or sees if he can linger it? Because Joe Mara already said that he's staying till the 2025. If you told the GM and the head coach that they can stay till 2025, then the jury's out at the end of that year, right?
Yep. But he is possibly the best healthy cornerback right now in the entire class. Out of all the corners, you can either watch Travis Hunter play or you can watch Tacario Davis play. A lot of the other top corners are injured, right? So just point that out, is that you are looking at somebody who is an available, healthy corner, and hopefully he continues playing as well as he is. So,
agreed. I like that. Good call.
I like that too.
Yep.
Yeah, we like that.
Okay, well, that concludes this episode of Mrs. R Relevant. I appreciate everybody. We had a big audience today. In 90 minutes, we just covered 16 players. So my hat's off to Bill and Randall. That was a lot of work. Great job, you guys.
Always have a good time. I always do.
Oh, yeah, it's always a blast.
We will see you again next Friday, and it won't be 8 wide receivers and 8 corners. We're going to take the list down a little bit. So I think it's 6 and 6, but until next week, same bat time, same bat channel. Thank you, everybody.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. See ya.